All right, so picture this. You've got this small group, right? They're kind of ill-equipped. They're facing off against this huge army, way better resources, and somehow, against all odds, they win a decisive victory.
That sounds pretty unbelievable, right?
Yeah, you'd think so, but that's exactly what we're diving into today. That's what our sources point to when we look at the Battle of Badr, and that's what we're going to be unpacking in this deep dive.
And what's really interesting is this isn't just some random event in history. It's all part of a bigger picture.
Oh, for sure. Context is everything, right?
Exactly. And as our sources lay it out, the Battle of Badr comes out of this really specific historical situation.
So, like, what's the backdrop here?
We gotta understand the early Muslim community in Mecca, they were facing some serious persecution. I mean, it was getting really hard to just live there.
Yeah, they were under a ton of pressure, weren't they?
Oh, absolutely. So much so that in 622 CE, that's Common Era, just to clarify, they decided to migrate to Medina, and that event's known as the Hijra.
Right, the Hijra, yeah, a major turning point. But even after moving, things didn't exactly get easier for them, did it?
No, not at all. The Quraysh tribe, who were basically the top dogs in Mecca at the time, they saw this whole migration thing as a direct threat.
Like to their power and everything.
Yeah, exactly. And our sources show that they went out of their way to make life difficult for the growing Muslim community. Like they straight up confiscated the property that was left behind by the people who migrated.
Wow, so that must have created a lot of tension, not to mention resentment.
It definitely did. And, the Muslims weren't just going to sit back and take it. They started hitting back in a way that would really sting the Quraysh right where it hurt their wallets.
So they went after their trade routes?
Bingo, they began intercepting these caravans that were going back and forth between Mecca and Syria, which was super important for the Quraysh economy.
Yeah, those trade routes were their lifeline. And these interceptions weren't just like small-scale raids either, right?
No way. They were a clear sign that things were escalating and that the Muslims were serious about challenging the Quraysh dominance.
This brings us then to that specific event in March 624 CE that really set the stage for the Battle of Badr. We're talking about the return of that major Quraysh caravan led by Abu Sufyan.
Right, the one loaded with all those valuable goods.
And looking at it from the Muslim side, it kind of seems like they saw an opportunity, right? I mean, the caravan only had like 40 guards for all that precious cargo.
Yeah, at first glance, it probably looked like a pretty good gamble, a chance to maybe even the score a bit.
Makes sense. But then things took a pretty dramatic turn.
They did. Abu Sufyan, he was a sharp guy,
right?
And he got wind of what the Muslims were planning. So what does he do? He changes his route, completely throws them off.
Pretty clever move, could have ended the whole thing right there.
You'd think so. But he didn't stop there. He knew that this wasn't just a random act. It was a direct challenge to the Quraysh.
So he didn't just try to slip away?
Nope. He sent a messenger straight to Mecca, calling for backup, basically saying, we need an army.
And just like that, what started as an attempt to intercept a caravan turned into this massive showdown.
Exactly. The stakes just got a whole lot higher.
And the Quraysh's response was intense. It went way beyond just protecting their merchandise, didn't it?
Oh, yeah. They weren't messing around.
Yeah.
They gathered an army of about 1,000 men. Think about that, 1,000 soldiers equipped with the works cavalry camels, the whole 9 yards, led by none other than Abu Jahl, a guy who was known for his hardcore opposition to the Muslims. Their goal, as our sources make very clear, was to completely crush this new Muslim community.
Wow, talk about a power move. So we've got the Quraysh with their massive army and this almost arrogant confidence. Our sources even say they brought musicians along like they were already celebrating their victory. And on the other side, we have the Muslims, a mere 313 of them. So what was their mindset like facing these seemingly impossible odds?
This is where it gets really interesting. Instead of freaking out, being intimidated by this massive force, the Muslims actually show incredible resolve.
They didn't lose their cool.
Not at all. And this is where the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, really shines as a leader. Our sources emphasize that he consults with his companions.
So it's not just him calling all the shots.
No, it's this collaborative approach combined with divine guidance that he always sought.
Makes sense. So we've got these 313 individuals, and yeah, they're outnumbered and outgunned, but they're driven by something way bigger than just material things.
Absolutely. It's their faith, their unwavering trust in Allah that fuels them. They're convinced that they're fighting for a just cause, and that conviction, even in the face of such overwhelming odds, becomes this powerful force driving them.
It's not just a feeling, it's what shapes their actions.
Exactly. And one of their key strategic moves was securing the water wells at Badr before the Quraysh even got there.
Smart move, especially out in the desert. Water is life.
You got it. It's a classic military tactic.
Yeah.
Control the water, control the battle. The Muslims knew this, and it gave them a huge advantage.
All right, so let's fast forward to the night before the battle. Our sources paint this really vivid picture of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, spending the whole night in prayer.
Can you imagine the weight of that moment? The anticipation and the seriousness of what was about to happen?
It must have been incredibly intense.
Absolutely. And it's in this moment of deep prayer that we see what many believe to be divine intervention.
Oh, like a miracle.
Well, it rained that night, and our sources highlight how this rain had this dual impact. For the Muslims, it made the sandy ground firmer, giving them a better footing. But for the Quraysh, it turned the ground into mud, making it way harder for them to move, especially their cavalry.
Talk about a game changer.
Mm-hmm.
And I also came across this Quranic verse, Surah Al-Anfal, verse 9, which talks about angels descending. How does that fit into all of this?
In Islamic tradition, this verse is seen as God's direct support for the Muslims. It's this idea of divine aid being sent to boost their morale and to strike fear into the hearts of their enemies.
So it adds this whole spiritual dimension to the battle.
Exactly. It's this belief that faith isn't just something personal, it can actually influence the course of events.
So here we are, it's the day of the battle. You've got the Muslims, a smaller dedicated group on solid ground with the sun at their backs, which is another tactical advantage, right? And then you have the Quraysh, a much larger force, but potentially slowed down by the mud and maybe even a little shaken. So what happens when these two armies clash?
Well, the battle kicks off with these individual duels, which was a common way to start things back then. The Quraysh send out 3 of their champion fighters, Shaiba and Walid, and they're met by 3 prominent Muslims, Hamza, Ali, and Ubadah.
Okay, so it's like a best of 3 situation.
Kinda, yeah. And our sources describe how Hamza and Ali win their duels pretty decisively. Ubadah, although he's wounded in the fight, he still helps take down his opponent.
That must have been a huge boost for the Muslims.
Even though Ubadah gets hurt, it sends a clear message: the Quraysh can be beaten.
Right, like they're not invincible. And then the main battle starts with the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, leading the charge. But even with those early victories and the advantages they had, they were still massively outnumbered.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible when you think about it. The courage and determination of those 313 Muslims was something else. And there's this other Quranic verse, Surah Al-Anfal, verse 12, where God commands the angels to fill the disbelievers with terror.
So again, this idea of a psychological battle happening alongside the physical one.
Exactly. It suggests that there were forces at play beyond just brute strength.
It wasn't just about who had more soldiers or better weapons. No, our sources also point out some key individuals on both sides who played crucial roles in this whole event. Let's talk about some of them.
Sure. So on the Muslim side, you've got the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. He's obviously the central figure. His leadership, his unwavering faith, it's a huge inspiration for everyone. And his strategic thinking guides all their actions.
He's the heart and soul of the movement.
You could say that. Then there's Abu Bakr, one of the Prophet's closest companions. He's there every step of the way, offering his unwavering support.
A true right-hand man.
Then you have Ali ibn Abi Talib. He's known for being this incredibly brave and skilled warrior. He plays a major role on the battlefield.
So like a legendary fighter.
Yeah, and then there's Hamza, the Prophet's uncle. He gets this awesome nickname, the Lion of Allah, because of his strength and courage in battle.
It sounds like he was a force to be reckoned with. And what about the key figures on the Quraysh side?
Well, leading their forces, you have Abu Jahl. He was this hardcore opponent of Islam, and his death during the Battle of Badr is seen as a major turning point.
Like it symbolizes the weakening of the Quraysh leadership.
Exactly. Then you have Abu Sufyan, the leader of that trade caravan, remember? He's the one who unintentionally set this whole thing in motion.
Right. His call for help is what brought the armies together.
And what's interesting is that he eventually converts to Islam later on.
Wow. So this battle had some serious long-term consequences.
It definitely did. And of course, we can't forget about the role that many believe the angels played. They're seen as a crucial element in the Muslims' victory.
So divine intervention is a big part of the narrative. Okay,
Yeah.
so after all this intense fighting, what's the final outcome? It was a lot more than just a small skirmish, wasn't it?
It was a major turning point. The Muslims win a decisive victory, and the Quraysh suffer huge losses. 70 of their leaders, including Abu Jahl, are killed, and another 70 are taken prisoner.
Wow, 70 leaders gone. That's massive.
It is. And on the Muslim side, they only lose 14 men, a tiny number compared to the Quraysh.
That's a pretty staggering difference. What happened to the prisoners that the Muslims captured?
That's an important part of the story, too. Our sources really emphasize how the Muslims treated the prisoners with kindness and dignity, which was pretty unusual for the time.
So they didn't mistreat them even though they were enemies.
No, they didn't. And this really had an impact on some of the prisoners. There are stories of some converting to Islam because they were so moved by how they were treated.
It shows a different side to the Muslims, a more compassionate side. And for the Quraysh, this defeat must have been a huge blow, not just in terms of losing so many men, but also for their reputation.
Absolutely. It was humiliating. It shook their power and really shifted the balance of power in Arabia.
Mm.
The Quraysh, who everyone thought were invincible, had been defeated by this smaller, less equipped force.
A force driven by their beliefs. So we've looked at the events of the Battle of Badr in detail. Now, what can we learn from it? What are the big takeaways?
I think there are a few key things that stand out. First, this idea that faith can be more powerful than numbers. The Muslims didn't win because they had more soldiers or better weapons. They won because of their unwavering belief and their trust in God.
That's a classic underdog story.
It is. And then there's the idea of divine intervention, which we see with the rain and the angels.
Yeah.
This reinforces the belief that if you're on the right side and you stay strong, you'll get help from beyond yourself.
Like there are forces at play that we can't always see.
Exactly. And we also see how important unity and strong leadership are. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, led with wisdom, and the Muslims were united under his guidance. That's a huge part of why they were able to overcome such a formidable enemy.
It's about more than just individual strength.
Right? It's about collective strength and purpose. And then there's this theme of mercy and justice even in war. The way the Muslims treated their prisoners sets a really high ethical standard. And finally, there's this contrast between humility and arrogance. The Quraysh let their pride get the better of them, while the Muslims remained humble and focused on their faith.
It's a reminder that arrogance can lead to downfall.
Definitely. So the Battle of Badr, it happened centuries ago, but it's more than just ancient history.
It's a story with timeless lessons.
Exactly. It shows how powerful faith, perseverance, and unity can be. It's inspiring.
It really is. So for you listening, I want to leave you with this thought. In a world that's often obsessed with power, technology, and numbers, what can we learn from the Battle of Badr about the power of conviction, unity, and sticking to your principles?
Can those things still make a difference today?
It's a question worth pondering. Can those things help us overcome the challenges we face today?
I think so.
Food for thought.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the Battle of Badr.
It's been a pleasure.